Let's be turning to the third psalm. To the third psalm. Just remember when we came out of class on Sunday. You know, David's facing a battle. His kingship is being challenged by his son, Absalom. Some of his closest advisors, like Ahithophel, has, gone with Absalom and try to think about where David's head is at right now and some of the issues that he's facing. And even if he can imagine his son, it's his son who is trying to battle against him and to take the kingship. We've seen in some of the other psalms, that we've looked at some of the psalms of David that probably very much depict where the mind of David was at this time. And some say that the third psalm was probably written like right now in our storyline. It's a short psalm. I want us to look at it quickly. Psalm 3. O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you are a shield around me, O Lord. You bestow glory on me and lift up my head. To the Lord I cry aloud, and he answers me from his holy hill. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear the tens of thousands drawn up against me on every side. Arise, O Lord, deliver me, O my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. It seems like it would fit in, doesn't it? With what David is facing and dealing with right now, it just seems like that this would fit in. Hey, Chris, this is not advancing up here. It's not. Yeah, I pushed it all the way through the backside and it still won't go. All right. There we go. There we go. So David's in deep trouble. He knows that. And it appears really that his end is coming. If Absalom, takes the kingship, it's not just a matter of scoot over, Dad, I'm taking over. No, that means that he's going to kill his father is what's going to happen. So he knows what's happening here. And here's this rebellion that began with his own son. But it's not just his son. There are those who are following Absalom now. And as we said, even some of his closest advisors. But it's more than that. I mean, now there is a following with Absalom. And how does that make David feel? Can we even imagine? I'm not really sure we can fully understand. And betrayal, like Ahithophel, one of the very ones from his inner circle that has turned on him. And so David does what he usually does well when things are really bad. He turns to God. And here, this psalm really represents David's cry. And this is his prayer. You are a shield around me. We sing a song that's pretty popular right now that says that, it's talking about when we sing that song, Shield About Me. This is kind of where it comes from. Some of the phrases are right here from this third psalm. Connect David with that when we sing that song. And we will find that in times in our life, we'll be able to relate very well because we would say some of these same things. And I hope that we would look to God and say that he answers me from his holy hill and have that kind of confidence and be able to say, the Lord sustains me. And can we say, I will not fear, thousands are drawn up against me. I don't know if we have thousands against us. Maybe we do. There are many who would stand against the principles that we try to live by. And maybe we are the ones that need to be standing up and saying to God, deliver me, God, oh my God. And from the Lord comes deliverance. I want us to have that kind of confidence. To know that deliverance comes from God. I want us to know that. So these are the things on David's mind. As we get back to our storyline here back in 2 Samuel chapter 18. I hope we'll all go back there. 2 Samuel. in chapter 18. David had a sizable army. It wasn't just Absalom who had an army. David does too. And David's army is of some size. It's divided into 3 groups. And men are called together and appointed as commanders of his army. 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1. Let's read just a little. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. Okay, that tells us already there's a sizable group that's here when there's commanders of thousands. David sent the troops out, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. And the king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. Really? So it's like, is this a good idea? I mean, is this a good idea that David is going to march out with the army? What do you think about that? How do you think that would go? You see any problems? His commander saw some problems. I mean, why? Why do you think that would be a problem?
If you take David out, then there's nobody on the throne.
If they take David out, the battle is over. You know, that's kind of how those things worked then. And really, as we get into this chapter a little bit more, just how much is David into the idea of killing his enemy, his son? Not so much. Okay, but in the idea of the army, his soldiers, that's going to be their focus. Well, kind of, sort of. We'll have to talk about that just a little bit as we go on. But, you know, his commanders talked him out of that. It would be better for you to give us support from the city. It would be better for you to stay here, is what he said.
It probably would have been a morale boost for Absalom's army as well, to have seen the object of Absalom's hatred at the head of them. Whereas if David was leading, they would have been more hesitant because David didn't want to kill his son.
Maybe so. If they had seen David there, that might have given them greater incentive even to go to battle. That's true. It could have been that way.
Verse 8 might give a good reason for why the men didn't want David to go also.
Okay, the battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest claimed more lives that day than the sword.
Sorry, verse 5.
Verse 5. Well, but verse 8 kind of plays into that too. That where they were going was not a kind place for battle, I think is the point with that. Verse 5. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. And all the troops heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of the commanders.
So the point, I think, is that the men recognized that David really did not want to do the harm that might need to be done in a battle such as this, because it was his son.
It's his son. So they heard what David said to the commanders about, be gentle with my son. And it's like, how are you gentle with the enemy? How are you going to be gentle with the one who's trying to usurp the throne? And so there's a bit of a conflict here. And so what do you think the soldiers are thinking? I mean, can you imagine, you hear what David said? Can you imagine how that went through the soldiers? And how do you think that went? What happens to the soldiers? Was it a rally cry for them? Come on, wake up with me. Was that a rally cry for them? David said, don't hurt his son.
Well, when they went against before, they killed, like, will come and brag about some of the things like Saul and stuff, he would kill those people. So I'm pretty sure they can remember the times when they did it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we just read verse 5. Look at verse 6. The army marched into the field to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There the army of Israel was defeated by David's men, and the casualties were great. 20,000 men. The Battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest claimed more lives that day than the sword. That's still a little bit hard for me to kind of conceptualize. This forest must have been brutal, as far as a place to be fighting at. Now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and the mule went under thick branches of a large oak. And Absalom's head was caught in the tree, and he was left hanging in midair, while the mule he was riding kept going on. How did he get caught in that tree? Remember that incredible hair that he had? They'd cut it off, and they would weigh how much it was, And he got caught up that way. So what happens now? Absalom's not dead, right?
I think we just read why so many people got killed in a horse as opposed to by the sword.
Right.
They hung themselves.
Perhaps. But we know with Absalom, he had this hair that was enough to get caught up and even support him there. All right, so what else about this? What else about this battle is going on? Right.
Typically, when you have a battle like this, or you have common purpose for all the soldiers that are in it.
Yeah.
Everybody. Well, we know in this example, in verse 10, that we don't know the name, but the person came up and he didn't kill him.
He recognized him.
He recognized who he was, but he didn't kill him. So we know at least one person, and it was probably maybe more than one.
Why didn't he kill him?
Because he heard what David told them.
He heard what David said.
It undermined the whole purpose of going to war in the first place.
David kind of
Either
did.
We're going to save us from this usurper, or we're not.
Yeah.
And I think it made all of the soldiers like, well, what do we do?
Yeah, what do you do? It's like they all knew Absalom had to be killed. I don't want to do it.
They didn't want to be the one.
Well, why don't you do it? No, I'm not going to do it. You do it. They didn't want to do it. And so the soldier, what did the soldier do? Told Joab, told the commander about this. And Joab's response, why didn't you kill him? And basically the soldier said, me? You want me to do that? And what did Joab tell him? If you had killed him, what would he do? We'll reward you. I'll give you a whole bunch of money. But what did the soldier say? What was his reply? Yeah, that's right. When David got upset to me, you would stand next to him. No, I don't know him. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of how that worked. So Joab now. Joab is going to step up. Let's see here. Or we take up and reading his here. Okay, verse 14. Joab said, I'm not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hand, plunged them into Absalom's heart while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops stopped pursuing Israel. Joab halted them. They'd killed Absalom. That was the battle. Israel has already lost heart. They've already killed 20,000. David's army has the power to win and to overtake them. Now Absalom is gone. Joab blows their own. This is done, is what he's saying. And so, what happens to the Israelite, or the Israel army, let's say? What happens to them? They're gone. Like mice, they're gone. They're back home. They're heading back home, But now someone has to give some news to David. And again, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of people lining up to do that, though there is one guy that says, hey, I'm going to go give some news to David. But he doesn't really have the whole story. And it's actually somebody who's come into our story before. The news here about Absalom's death. Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. Who was Zadok? Remember him? He was one of the priests. Okay? So we see him, we meet him here again, in this battle. or after the battle. And let me run, this is verse 19, let me run and take the news to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies. Oh, you are not the one to take the news today, Joab told him. You may take the news another time, but you must not do so today because the king's son is dead. I mean, he's saying, like, you don't really want to be the one that delivers that to the king. Then Joab said to a Cushite, go tell the king what you have seen. Cushite bowed his head before Joab and ran off. But Ahimaaz, he's pretty insistent. Come what may, please let me run behind the Cushite. And Joab finally tells him, okay, fine, you go. And Ahimaaz goes a different way, and he gets to David before the Cushite does. Of course, he doesn't have the full story. I mean, he doesn't have the full story of what's going on. And so David is back at Mahanaim and sees runners coming. And he's thinking there is news, and he's right. There is news here that is coming. And even one of the watchmen says, Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, it looks like he's one of the ones that's running. And David says in verse 27, well, he's a good man. He comes with good news. Well, good news, that sort of depends on how you want to look at this. And he called out to the king, all is well. And he bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. He says, praise be to the Lord your God. He has delivered up the men who lifted their hands against my lord the king. And David's first question, is the young man Absalom safe? That's the first thing he asks. And Ahimaaz, I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me. But I don't know what it was. I don't know what was going on. And about that time, the Cushite arrived. And he had the news. May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man. May they all be dead, is what the messenger is saying. And David got the point. Oh, my son Absalom. My son, Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son. What do we think about the response? What do you think?
I don't know of another person in the Bible, but then who we have so much of an insight onto how they felt. You know, and I could see it. If my son my daughter's son, rose up against me, would I rather than win or lose? How awful that must be.
Yeah.
And you know, you think, and I don't want to take the example too far because you can't really, but we're told that David's a man of God's own heart. How often have we failed God or turned against God? And would he want us dead? Well, not exactly, but we killed his son, and yet, I mean, some of these things are deep emotions, and you can
Sure.
see how that would occur. Doesn't make him right or wrong, in my opinion.
Right.
Maybe it makes him less of a leader or better leader, we don't argue, but it certainly makes him real.
It makes him a father. You know, that part we can understand. Was this the best thing to say as a commander? Well, that might be a little different. You know, because others hear him. They see his grief this way. And so what do they think? And what's the response by those around him even? Or the soldiers. The soldiers that have won the battle and on their way back. You know, word spreads just so quickly. How are they to feel? And what are they to think? What would you say?
They're not coming back like they're victorious in something, but they're coming back like they were ashamed of something.
Yeah, now they're like ashamed of what they've done. They did what they were supposed to do as soldiers. They have preserved the kingship of David. You know, they've done what they needed to do. But now they're embarrassed when they come back. And maybe not even sure how David's going to treat them when they come back. Can you imagine that? So it's kind of it's an odd and uncomfortable scene, you know, that's just really unfolding here. So the king, in chapter 19, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. The whole army And for the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning, because on that day the troops heard it said, the king is grieving for his son. The men stole into the city that day as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. The king covered himself and cried, "Oh, Absalom, my son." So, what were they supposed to do? Joab comes into the story again. Joab comes in to the house of the king. "Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you, and you hate those who love you." David, what are you doing? Not only are you confused, now you've confused everybody else. What are we supposed to think? What are we supposed to do? Joab is right to go to David and to say, ask him, what is this? David needed to change his attitude. He needed to turn these things around, and David did. He did that. And in verse 8 it says, chapter 19, "So the king got up and took a seat in the gateway, and when the men were told, 'The king is sitting in the gateway,' they all came before him." So David had allowed his grief to interfere with the wisdom that is needed, to be guiding a nation, to be the king that he's supposed to be. He let his grief get in the way of that. And Joab did right in this case, to kind of sort that out. So he greeted the soldiers as they were coming back into town. Well, as we said already, the Israelites, those who were supporting of Absalom, they took off for home. They took off like mice. They're gone. They're heading home, from the battle. The battle with Absalom, that part is over. But there's still turmoil, because you have those who were supporters of Absalom, those who were supporters of David. It had kind of divided the kingdom. And it's not all just flowed back together at this point, has it? In fact, really we're just 40 years or so away from the divided kingdom. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of divided now. And David's going to kind of pull some things back together. But I don't know that it ever gets to be as united as it once was. There seems to be kind of a rift now that I'm not sure if it just ever goes away. It's that kind of an issue. It's that kind of a problem. And so the strife and the quarreling, the people are confused, and here they're kind of in limbo about what to do. There are conflicting signals. Can you imagine even those who are supporters of David wouldn't they even be just questioning and wondering, has David just become weak? Is David, is he really fit to be king anymore? I mean, here David had been this king who was a great warrior and who had accomplished so much in the direction God wanted some things to happen and go. But does he have the ability to do it now? We start wondering all these things, Wayne.
I'm wondering if this division that you're describing there now might be the division that eventually led to the divided kingdom.
Well, I think that's going to be part of it. There is a division now that we see, and even though David still has a little time left, and then his son Solomon reigns for 40 years, we still call it the United Kingdom. It just doesn't seem as united as it once was.
In some ways, I feel like the weaknesses in this foundation started back when David didn't go to war with his people, and then we got Bathsheba, and we got, all the subsequent things where David lost his way, and he just seems like he's lost his fight, I guess. He's lost his passion for serving God, and, whether it was feeling guilty about his choices so he didn't say anything to Amnon, and Absalom's over here festering for 2 years, and he's still not, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
It's
So there was a
bit of
weakness.
descent into,
There was a weakness with David from that point on, you know. And though while we read about, you know, David confessing his sins, praying God forgiveness, God gave forgiveness. Do you ever wonder sometimes, did David ever fully forgive himself? Did he ever get past that? Now, to be fair, there were these constant reminders of his sin. God said that there's consequences, and these consequences are going to go on for generations. There was that. You know, there's not going to be peace in your house. There's going to be bloodshed in your house. Well, yeah. I mean, we see that. These are the consequences that came with his sin. There's probably applications we can make to a lot of those things too. And we think that through just a little bit. So anyway, let's think just one more little point or two about Absalom, then we're moving on from Absalom. Absalom is dead now, but before he died, a little side trip here. There's a monument that you can see in Jerusalem. It's not the monument that Solomon built. That has probably been gone for a long time, but a monument there that has been built in a more recent era, perhaps in the same spot as a monument that Solomon built. Why did Absalom built? Why did Absalom build himself a monument? Well, he was full of himself, there is that. So his name would be remembered. He had no sons. He had no sons, so he built himself a monument. It's in the Kidron Valley, just on the east side of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. You can see this there today. And it's in the same area described in 2 Samuel chapter 18, you know, where it's kind of in the Valley of the Kings, is what sometimes the Kidron Valley is called, because there are some other monuments up and down in this valley. This is the one that is attributed now to Absalom, though again, that's not the one he built, you know, generations ago. Right across from the Mount of Olives, just across the way over here. And so you would see that today if you visit Jerusalem. But we move on past Absalom now. Absalom is no more. So most wanted David to come back to Jerusalem, and they're anxious for him to come back. Interestingly enough, though, Judah, his own tribe, had not sent word to him to come back. And so David sent word through Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. He sent word to them. This is chapter 19. And in verse 14, it says that he had won over the hearts of the men of Judah. Though they were one man, he sent word to the king, return, you and all your men. Okay, this is the word that went back to David. Yes, Judah, we're speaking as one man. Yep, we want you to come back. So he gets this word. So it was about this time that David appointed Amasa, Absalom's commander, to be his commander. Always just strikes me as odd. You're going to appoint the commander of your enemy's army to be your commander now. I think this tells us something about how badly he did not want to appoint Joab to be the commander of his army. Even though Joab had been a successful leader and commander of David's army, Joab has also done several things that David didn't want him to do. And so he's holding off from appointing Joab to be the commander and appoints Amasa to be that commander.
I think it's interesting that multiple times David has had to issue Joab and his brother, at least in the King James version, multiple times, why are you doing this to me, you son of Zariah, or Joab or his brother? It seems like he's finally like, okay, I've had enough of you, I need to appoint someone who can actually obey your orders.
Right. Though Joab did some things that needed to be done. But still, like, Joab killed Absalom. And I think David is never going to get like, hey, I'm okay with that. I think
Joab was the man. He conquered cities and had to call David and say, hey, if you don't take the city, I'm going to keep it.
Yeah.
I mean, so many things. It's one of the most surprising verses to me that out of this whole study. But you see why.
But yeah, it's like you kind of do see why. I mean, there's this. There are three people in particular that David said not to kill, that Joab killed. Well, they needed to be killed, but David had said no, and Joab did it.
To be a little bit of a, I don't want to say devil's advocate here, but grief does weird things to your brain.
Well, it can.
And in some ways, no, he's never going to forgive Joab for taking his son's life. In other ways, maybe appointing Amasa was a way to be closer to his son. There's a lot of reasons that people do things, and there's a lot of things that people don't understand when you're grieving someone. Like
Very
that.
true. Very true. So David's returning to Jerusalem. Remember, he's been up in Mahanaim, which is a pretty good ways. He's up here. And so in chapter 19, the latter part of chapter 19, we see this. We see him coming back. And some of the events that happen and take place as he's coming back. He had to flee Jerusalem and cross over the Jordan River to get to the other side. Now he's coming back. And imagine what a different scene it is now. I mean, he was fleeing for his life when he left. And now he's coming back and receiving ceremony along the way as what is reserved for a king. And so imagine the scene of David coming to the river, seeing people on both sides of the river that are supportive of him and crying out to him. And David has there many helpers. There are many who came out to see him. There's Shimei and Ziba and Mephibosheth and Barzillai and Kimham and others that are mentioned. Now, all of those haven't always been supportive of David. You know, remember Shimei was the one who cursed David when he was on his way out of town. Remember he was on the Jericho road? And Shimei was cursing him. Well, now he's come back saying, well, David, I'm sure glad everything worked out all right. Welcome back home, you know. And it's interesting to me that David doesn't say, you're gone. And there's some others that bring some confusion to the party. And yet David doesn't take any of these out. Why? Well, for what purpose does he not? I think in part, it's a day of rejoicing. There are some things that he's going to deal with later, but not this day. This is a day of rejoicing. This is a day of celebration. And there's some of those things he's not going to deal with in that way just right now. All right. Our time's done. Sunday, we won't have this class, but next Wednesday, we're taking up here just in the last part of chapter 19. We're going to review this just a little bit and then be moving forward. Look at the next, we're going to be going through 2 chapters, 20 and 21 next week. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for participating so well.